Welcome to Choose the Nickel. I'm your host, George Bailey. My co-founder and technical support is the gorgeous Christina Bailey. This podcast is about giving kids financial freedom. We're interviewing fascinating people for their insights about how children learn to be financially savvy. Our guests come from diverse, sometimes conflicting schools of thought, and we love the opportunity to learn from them. We encourage all to weigh our guests' ideas on how to help children thrive, both financially and in general. We invite you to visit our website at www.choosethenickel.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and try out the things we are learning on the podcast. We end every quarter of our podcast with a family member. We'd like to end this quarter of Choose the Nickel by featuring Christina's uncle, John Probst, as our next guest. John has an incredible track record in the world of business. He is the owner or part owner of Pro Hosting, V Chocolates, Core EMR, Probst Technologies, Banyan Consulting Group, Covington Senior Living, Covington Village, and The Corner Restaurant. This list does not include the many other ventures in which he's been involved. John is an expert in taking struggling businesses and turning them into success stories. John and his wife Carol live in Midway, Utah. They have 6 children and 4 grandchildren. Ladies and gentlemen, John Probst. John Probst, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, George. It's fun to be with you.
John, if you could give me some background on what it is that you do.
You know, I'm kind of more of a self-proclaimed maverick. Some people would say I'm a serial entrepreneur, but the definition of an entrepreneur is somebody who spends other people's money. I like to spend my own money. So I risk my own money, and so therefore I claim to be a maverick.
A maverick. One of the stories that, you can't avoid in the Nielsen family, at least on kind of your side of the family, from my family basically, is something that you did when you were younger. You talked about, or you haven't told me about this yourself, but I'd like to hear it from your own mouth. This experience in starting up your own internet connection company here in Midway. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What happened?
You betcha. So we live up here in Midway, Utah. And years ago, we lived up in this valley. It's called the Heber Valley. And everything was long distance. And I was commuting over to Park City. And I'm a computer programmer. And I needed access to the internet as it just took off. And there was a young guy here. He was 16 years old. And his name was Schmidl, I think. And he created a company called Cybernaut. Blair Schmidl. And he was going to charge me by the hour. There was no way I was going to pay per hour for my access to the internet. So I had called him and said, I want access. I'm going to get on every now and then, but when I'm on, I just want to pay you a flat monthly fee of $20 a month. He laughed and told me, there's no way I'm going to do that. I'm going to charge you per hour. And if you want internet, I'm it. And I said, well, Blair, you can either do that or I'm going to go ahead and start Shadowlink, another internet dial-up company that's going to compete with you. And he laughed at me and said, good luck with that. So as soon as I hung up the phone, I called one of my business partners, Lance, and said, Lance, are you in? He said, I sure am. 3 months later, we had Shadowlink up and running. Within a year later, I had called Blair to say, Blair, I'm going to pay you $200,000 and take over your business. And he said, I'm not going to sell it to you. And I said, that's fine. Another year later, I had acquired all of his customers for free because his service was so bad.
Wow. It just goes to show that there is a need for cooperation in business. He would have benefited.
Oh, absolutely. He was a bright, smart young guy. He had national coverage at age 16 for Cybernaut. He could have leveraged that and gone really big, but instead he chose not to kind of work with us and just want to do his own thing, which I can understand and respect. And then I tried to buy him out, but then his pride, there was no way he was going to let me buy him out. So then he just kind of lost it everyhow. So we ended up with about 1,200 users in those couple of years. And I was probably in 400 or 500 homes installing on Windows 3.1 using the old technology and spending hours trying to make the internet work on 9600 baud modems with, Trump sockets and all those types of things. So we survived.
Take me back to your childhood. I'm very interested in this because there are 2 attributes that I want to draw attention to about John Probst that stick out in this story. Number one is your willingness to play fair. and, to work with others. But then the second one is also that you already knew, at least to some level extent, data programming. I'd like to learn a little bit more about where those come from. Do they each of those, do they kind of find their roots in your childhood?
Oh, possibly. I'm a twin, so I'm the oldest in my family. So I always had a playmate with me, someone to compete against. But early on, I'm more of a kind of a social guy. I remember reading a Boy's Life magazine when I was probably, 5 or 6. And in the back of the Boy's Life magazine, it had these places where you go buy pencils or cards and light bulbs, and you can go sell them. And the more points you get, then you can trade those points for pup tents, for wallets, for radios, for cool gadgets, flashlights, and walkie-talkies. So I'd get mom and dad to up front, and they'd get me the 2,000 Christmas cards. And I'd take each box, 50 of them at a time, and go door to door selling to my neighbors Christmas cards, light bulbs, pens, candy, chocolates, whatever it was, just so I could get these points so I could go ahead and buy my toys. And so I remember many times my twin Brad, we'd be outside in the pup tent that we just acquired. And it'd be like Friday night. This is back in the day when you'd have to wait till 6 o'clock on Saturday morning to watch Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah.
We would sit there and conspire, and I'd say, okay, you keep the light on and the little radio going. I'm going to jump on my bike. I'm going to go up to the store, buy us a bunch of candy so we can have candy the next morning. Mom and Dad were clueless that I had slipped out at age 5, 6, going up to the store to get candy. So the next morning we'd wake up 5:30. We'd watch static on the TV until we only had 3 channels at the time, until, Captain Kangaroo came on. We could start watching cartoons in the morning.
Just out of curiosity, were you living in Midway at this point?
No, we were not Midway. We were down in Salt Lake City.
Lake City.
Yep. We were about 7200 South and 1701 Cloverdale Road. So that's where we were living, in a little Rambler. So
excellent. And so you would slip out. Was this a normal thing? I mean, how often were you doing this?
This was pretty weekly.
Wow.
We'd sleep out in the pup tent, but we were free back then. Mom and Dad, we would early in the morning, we'd jump on our bikes, grab a sack lunch. Mom wouldn't see us till 5 or 6 o'clock at night. We were just gone on adventures.
Nice. Very cool. I can't even imagine what that would be like because I have a 6-year-old, I have an 8-year-old, I have a 10-year-old, and even my 10-year-old, if they slipped out in the middle of the night, I don't know what I'd do, and I think that this is I think we're capturing the day of free range parenting and stuff like that. I hope to see that. Absolutely.
And I was a free range kid. I had adventures. My adventures kind of paralleled those of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. My childhood was amazing that way. So I'd go and I would spend hours, days scouring all the fields looking for old bottles that I could turn around and sell. I'd gather newspapers that I could turn around and sell. So everything was kind of driven, trying to find money just so you can kind of have some fun, times playing, going to the movies, going down to the mall and bowling and all those types of fun things. So it was a great time.
With all of the fun, was there a time where it became evident for you that you needed to start saving money?
I never was a good saver. I was always good at acquiring money, trying to figure out how to get money from my buddies. How could I sell money, arts and crafts, whatever it was. In fact, I'll tell you a fun story. When I was 10 years old, we've moved now from Mountain View Elementary School. We moved over to Upland Terrace. And I had discovered something I thought was an amazing thing. I would go to the 7-Elevens and I would just sit there and play pinball and hang out, and I'd wait for these high school guys or older men. They'd come by in their Camaros and Trans Ams, and they'd stop at the big, huge trash cans, and they'd throw out their old adult magazines, their Playboys. And I would dumpster dive in and retrieve those and take them home.
Oh, dear.
Now, I am 10 years old, and I am selling porn to my buddies at the elementary school. And a centerfold at that time was going for $5.
Yeah.
And the other pictures I could sell for $4, $3, $2. So I had like 10 or 15 Playboys underneath my bed.
Yeah.
In my house. And I'm a very Christian base. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. My parents are all in. They're all committed.
Public confession right here, baby.
And here I am selling porn to my buddies. And I'm making some good money. And people are like, wow, what's going on? And my younger brother tells my mom, my younger brother Jared, who's 18 months younger, he's in the 3rd grade. He tells mom that John's selling naked women at school. My mom came in and asked me about that, and I said, and she saw all the Playboys, and she was really upset. And I looked at her and I said, but Mom, it's a business. I'm just selling these things as a business opportunity here. You can't be mad at me. I'm making money.
Okay. So is that the end of the story?
No.
Okay.
All the story
I wouldn't
gets
want to end
better.
it prematurely, but I do have a question I'm going to save. Go ahead.
It gets better. So my mom looked at me and said, okay, I understand what you're saying, Johnny. And then she left, and she, of course, took all of my magazines. I'm like, whew, I dodged a bullet here. I got out of this one. Okay, good. 10 minutes later, my mom comes back with my grandma, who happened to be visiting with us.
Oh, dear.
And pinned on my grandma were all these different pictures of naked women and a dollar amount for each one. And my mom said to me, okay, Johnny, I'm going to help you with your business. Let's go next door to Sister Barney and start selling these. What do you say?
Oh,
at that point, I was mortified. Kind of that whole shock and awe thing came and hit me at age 10 that, you know what? That's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. I can't sell this to my neighbors next to. And my mom said, if you can't sell it out in the public, you shouldn't be selling it, and it's wrong. Do you understand?
That.
And so I learned a valuable lesson right then and there from my mom, who's extremely wise and great parent and great teaching moment, kind of about life. So here I was thinking, I'm making a ton of money. Yes, that's true at a very young age, but it was the wrong way to do it.
That is bold parenting, John.
Yep.
And I guess the question that I was saving was, what would you have done as a parent? But I'm taking it right now. I think you probably would have done the same thing.
Oh, absolutely. That was a good move. That was a win on mom's part. Sometimes as parents, you lose. You don't always have your successes, but that was a big success win for mom.
Wow. Out of the park. I love that. Okay. That's great. So going back to savings, when was the turning point where, at what point did you feel like I need to start putting away a little bit of this money?
When my dad gave me a book called The Richest Man in the World, Og Mandino wrote this 80-page book that says, you got to save 10% of your money. So it was like, you got to make your pennies make money for you. And so the ability to save is what allows you to become wealthy, basically, and save money. The other good book that talks about that is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And he talks about getting in the 4th quadrant. There's 4 quadrants.
Yeah, Robert Kiyosaki.
And if you haven't read it, read it. Yeah. Get in the 4th quadrant, So stop spending all your money and start making your money make you wealthy. So that's kind of the idea. So, but really I was in high school when I read The Richest Man in the World from, the guy from Babylon. He kind of kept saving all of his 10% of everything he made. He always saved. And that was a great kind of teaching moment. But the realization's got to come to yourself. At some point, you got to do it yourself. You can't listen to your parents, your brothers, your siblings. You got to kind of matriculaze this and internalize it into yourself and say, this is something that's inherently something I need to do. You got to kind of self-realize it and work from there.
It's easy to understand how savings would be in the grasp of a young man or a young woman. And I like what you say about it's not just a matter of savings for savings' sake. You understood that with savings came interest. Your money was making money, and that was the appeal. But this idea of the 4th quadrant, and I'll give kind of a weak overview of Robert Kiyosaki's point on Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is essentially that you've got different types of people and the way that they expect to be compensated. Some people will be compensated for their time, but other people really, in the 4th quadrant is when you, in fact, own the systems that are generating money. Do you think that that's a fair way to put it?
Yep.
And do you think, at what point did you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
Oh, probably in my early 20s.
Early 20s. Do you think a younger person could have read that and understood what Kiyosaki was saying?
Yes. I just don't know if he would have, though.
Yeah. How many kids are like,
you want to start reading these financial books.
Let's put down, The Hobbit or more, my Centerfold or whatever, and let's whip out Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yeah. So it's interesting because what I would love to see done, and I see some people out there doing this, is they're putting together kind of a system or a curriculum of financial literacy topics and putting them together. And I can't say that I've mastered, where everything goes, but I would like to think that a teenager could understand that fourth quadrant, could really understand the people who really succeed put together systems that allow them to be able, where essentially they replace their role in the system so that they're sitting back and they're creating vision rather than doing the labor.
Correct.
And that's something that I would love for kids to understand because it leads to ambition, it leads to innovation, and all of us prosper from it. At least that's my thinking on it.
Yep, I would agree with you.
Any other stories from your childhood that you think we should know?
After that, so shortly thereafter, after I kind of lost that ability to make that money, Dad got me and Brad at age 10 again, signed up for a newspaper route. So after school, we'd always come home.
These are non-adult newspapers, I take it.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
This is the Deseret News.
Good for Dad.
And so Brad and I, we had to earn our money. We got 10 speeds. And I remember Brad bought himself a Schwinn 10-speed.
The Schwinn.
I didn't have enough money for the Schwinn, so I ended up buying a Prince. But my Prince 10-speed was so much better than Brad Schwinn. Brad Schwinn broke down all the time. He kept fixing it. He must have gotten a lemon Schwinn or something. But my cheap old 10-speed was far superior and far better. So I made a lot better savings and a better purchase as I picked up this 10-speed called the Prince. And so, but the story is we'd come home from school as our friends were playing and we were jealous of them playing. We'd have to sit there and fold up all these newspapers, put them in our bags, hop on our 10-speeds, go down on our route, take a couple hours to get this done. And then, of course, Sunday's newspaper was early in the morning, and that thing was massive. So most of the time, Mom and Dad would help us by letting us jump in the back of the station wagon and deliver those. But the value of work was an important thing. Mom and Dad always taught us that. So as other kids were playing, we were off working. We always had work projects. I remember I was in junior high. My mom had split me and Brad and sent us to separate junior highs. We're not identical twins. We're fraternal.
Yeah.
But still, Mom wanted us to have separate identities. So I got the draw to go all the way down to Evergreen Junior High, and Brad went to Wasatch. While I was at Evergreen, on my way home, I stopped and got a job at Wasatch Nursery. So for 3 hours, I'd sit there and help, in the nursery, water plants, move things around, fix things and stuff. So I always had a job. After that, I went and got a job at kind of a little challenger preschool. I was a janitor for a couple of years. But the big thing that was happening during my life at that point was technology was just kind of on the rise. Radio Shack was the coolest thing you'd ever want to be at. We all loved Radio Shacks and putting our kits together, but the computers were just starting to come out. I'm a junior at so from Evergreen, it goes to Olympus. I spent 1 year at Olympus. Then I switched to Skyline. My junior year at Skyline High School, I jumped into computer science programs, and they were fascinating, and I loved them. At first, I didn't get it, but then all of a sudden, a light bulb clicked on me, and I could program. So my senior year at Skyline, I was teaching computer education on a, kind of a level up at Churchill Junior High, and I'm just this little 17-year-old kid teaching adults how you do DOS and BASIC and things like that. So I really kind of had an initial, kind of fast track, let's get into the computers thing, and away I went.
Wow. That's a powerful connection at an early age. I want to ask another question about your childhood, and that is, it sounds like you were an early riser.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't require much sleep. I couldn't wait till the morning would come so I could get up and get going and start my day and love it. And then later on in life, it's fun because I remember my mom giving me a book of something about spiritual roots and human development. Might have been a Covey book or something. And they talk about that. They talk about you got to win the battle of the bed. You're going to go to bed at night and you say, I'm going to get up at 6:00. And then you set the alarm. And then are you going to get up when the alarm goes? That's the first victory of the day. And if you don't win it, you've already failed. I hate failure. You got to win. So if you say you're going to get up at 6, you get up at 6. Then the second thing you do is you make your bed. There are so many people in this world that they get up in the morning and they think that's good and their bed's just this, atrocious and they leave it. And their excuse is, oh, it'll just get messy tomorrow. It'll just be the same thing. Who cares? Well, it matters to me. It matters to your soul. It matters to your spirit. If you say you're going to do it, just do it and be done with it and have a win. So you get up first, you have your first win, your second win, you make the bed. You've already got 2 wins behind you. You're off to a great start.
There's a general, you may remember his name. If not, I'll find it later and put it in the show notes, who basically talks about making your bed as being that first win of the day. I think you're right. I actually am inclined to agree with you that it is a major victory. I try to get up at 5 and I say try, which is pathetic. It's a very telling verb and I don't like using it. But and there actually, I'm very good right now. I've been pretty, solid about it, but that's a real victory. Making your bed is a big victory. And I think that mentality that goes towards kind of like, I want my surroundings to be organized so that I can function fully, and giving yourself those little victories are very important. Do you have any parenting advice for today's parents?
The biggest thing I think is just teaching the law of the harvest to kids. The kids today, it feels like there's an entitlement. They're just participation trophies, all kinds of things like that. And we just need to tell them, hey, you get to reap what you sow, basically. If you put in the effort, then you get the reward. No one's giving you a handout.
Yeah. It's very powerful advice. I want to learn just a little bit more about your businesses and then go to my last question. And you no longer are focused. I mean, you do have some, online businesses and whatnot, but you've got a couple other things that you do that are very exciting. V Chocolates is one, and you're also doing some real estate deals with retirement housing. Tell me about kind of your favorite stuff that you're doing right now, what gets you out of bed right now, John?
Yeah. There's a lot of things. I tell people nowadays I'm kind of spinning a lot of plates. They ask me what I do and I say I'm a professional chauffeur driver and I drive Carol around. That's kind of what I do. Yeah. So where I've come from is I like trying to generate and creating income and starting businesses in different sectors. So I kind of briefly talked about Shadowlink. Shadowlink parlayed into Pro Hosting, which is a web hosting company, which we continue to have today. Then we moved everything down to Dallas, Texas. Our corporate headquarters was down there. We bought several gaming companies called Netfire and Game Demons. We put a big bow around all of those and sold it up to a company up in the Pacific Northwest called Speakeasy. And we did keep Pro Hosting on that, but we kind of sold all that and kind of had some fun. From that, we went into the chocolate business, V Chocolates. And during all of this time, I've got these other companies. I created a board game that I haven't taken to market yet called Battle Mountain. Okay. And I'm still waiting to see if we're going to, because with all the apps and those types of things, it's like, the board game's kind of dead, but there's still kind of people that still play them. So we're just not quite sure where that's at, but we've got that behind us. We started a retail company selling some clothing called Trendy Exchange. We've had that for 5-6 years, and we just kind of closed the last one of those things. During all this time, we started another company called Core EMR, Correctional Electronic Medical Records. Very specific niche market, selling software to jails to take care of the inmates inside the jails as far as their health cares. There's just been a flurry of other things, but recently we've gotten involved in the assisted living. And that came from a good business partner of ours called Mindy Hill. And she ran Jamestown in Provo for a long time. And she had left them and started selling some pharmacy stuff. And she hooked up with us at Core EMR. And as our paths recrossed, she said, I want to get back in this space and do something. And so we jumped and started a company called Banyan Consulting Center, focusing software into assisted living facilities, basically. And then as we looked at a bunch of other opportunities, an opportunity came to be the manager of an assisted living company. And so we did that last year, and we call ourselves Covington Senior Living. We have a 102 bed in Orem, and we're just going to open at the end of this month, a 110 bed in Lehigh. And there's a couple opportunities in Kansas City and in Mesa. It's just kind of looking like this is exploding on us because there's such a need with all the baby boomers coming. So we're going to jump in here and go have some fun. But like I said, I like kind of the diversity of looking at trying to create income streams from different sectors. You've seen our restaurant that we're building right here in Midway. I've never been in the restaurant business. And one of my friends came to me and he had an opportunity, he bought this property and he had kind of a chef that was going to help him. He had the business model, everything. Then the chef left him. And he's 10 years older than I am, and I'm 53 years old. And so I thought, Carl, I better at least look and make sure I put it on paper so you can see what you're getting yourself involved in. And after I put the whole model together and gave it to him, and he looked at that and said, I want you part of this business. And he said, well, what do you think? You want to join me on this adventure? And I said, restaurant? Absolutely not. That's when Carol, my wife, said, sure, we'll help you. So we're going to be jumping in on the corner restaurant here on Midway, Utah to help. My hesitancy about doing a restaurant is the fact that they're either you win big or you lose big.
So true.
And most banks will not give you a loan if it's a restaurant because they know that most of them failed. They don't know what they're doing.
And it's notorious in that manner.
Yep.
The restaurants fail at a greater rate than basically any other business I can think of.
Yep. That's because there's, pretty easy to start. You can do these things. And so we're going to see. So we're trying to protect ourselves as much as possible with that. But with all of those things going on, so right now I'm generating income from multiple businesses, from multiple different sectors in the space. And I kind of have attention deficit disorder. I'll start the company. I'll get good people to come in and take it over.
Yeah.
One of the rules in life is you can't move on until you replace yourself.
Yes.
Now, most people are scared to death in their company or wherever they're at. There's no way they're going to train someone to replace them because now what will they do? But I say you can't move on till you get somebody to replace yourself.
And to put this all in context, there is a major succession crisis on the horizon in the United States. Because as you pointed out, as the baby boomers retire, and they think, well, I'm just going to sell my business. And two things really get in the way. One is that, there may not be ready buyers. But the bigger thing that is unacknowledged is there are just not ready sellers.
Yes.
These people, they're so emotionally attached to what they've created. This is my baby. I made this thing. How could I, but you have to be willing to do that.
Yep, you have to. And then you move on and go do the next thing. So that's kind of what I keep doing. I look at people driving by me on the freeway and say, how can I get $5 from each one of those cars that pass me?
You give new meaning to the word diversification, which we normally apply to the stock market. I figure if I've got, some Apple stock, that's my whatever sector. And then and then I've got some, Ford stock and, and as long as I've got different sectors, then I'm good. I think that that's not as mature an understanding of diversification as what you're demonstrating right now. And I find myself, and this is a question for me, more as a professional more than as a parent. And that is, as I find myself reaching out into different sectors, I've got a consultancy and I've got a life insurance practice and I've got this podcast and I've got something else that's in the works right now. I'm worried about what it takes to balance all of these different areas together. What would you do? How is it that you create balance?
You just got to hire good people that you can trust. So, For example, the V Chocolate Company, we have our president down there is named Brent Goodrich. I probably talk to Brent maybe once or twice a month until Christmas because V Chocolates is a seasonal business. We make half of our revenue in 30 days. That's when it's all hands on deck. But other than that, I trust that Brent is going to run that ship and just kind of keep it going so that I don't have to worry about it. So there's a story, if you don't mind me sharing for a couple.
Yeah.
So a young guy up in Idaho, he's on a farm. He's learned how to work and he goes and he approaches this old man that's got a farm and says, I'd like to come hang out with you and work with you if you'd hire me. And the old man looked at this young guy and said, yeah, I think that would be okay. Why don't you, here's your bunkhouse, go ahead. And he kind of teaches him the farm and everything. But one night, this ferocious storm comes up. The winds are just howling and this old farmer wakes up and he goes and bangs on the bunk and the kid doesn't answer. And he's banging on the bunk and he's like, this lazy kid, what the heck? And he runs outside and he goes over to the big old barn and he takes a look inside and he sees that all the horses are in their stalls. Everything's good and the barn door is closed. He goes over and he checks on all the pigs and they're all just fine. And he runs over the haystack and he sees that the tarp's all over it and everything like that. And then he remembers what the young kid said. The young kid said to him, I can sleep when the wind blows. So the farmer understood that this kid just did his job, which allows him to be able to sleep when the wind blows. Beautiful. So as a business guy, when I'm bringing in my MBA guys or whoever's going to run these companies of mine, I need to trust them that they're going to take care of that business as I turn it over so I can go do the next thing.
Yes.
That I can sleep when the wind blows. So that's a powerful metaphor that we use today, but I would use that as I'm hiring these people to take over and kind of just keep the ship going, keep the company working.
So John, now that we are back on, we lost a little bit of recording, but I'm going to finish the interview right now. Tell me, what is your most favorite charitable cause?
You know, kind of what we had talked about before is that I am one of those people that really don't have a favorable, cause per se. Instead, I happen to be in position to know a lot of people, so I'm able to bless and help, because I think it's important that you give back and you bless people's lives. And so instead of giving to an organization or something like that, I seek out the people that, I'm personally connected to and see and step in where I can to try to help bless and make their lives better.
Yeah, I love that. And I know that you mentioned before that business itself, when done right, is something that also really does give value. And I tend to agree with that.
Yep, I would echo that all day long. In fact, a lot of people think they're in business to make money. I think we're in business to bless people's lives. And in the process, while you're blessing people's lives, it's okay if you make money.
Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate your thoughts, and I appreciate your time, willingness to be on the show.
Yep, it's been great. Wish you the best, George.
Thank you so much, John. Everybody else, thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the interview and found useful ideas about things you can do with your kids. Be sure to check the show notes at www.choosethenickel.com for links to names, books, and other resources we discussed in today's show. Also, please subscribe to our newsletter and visit our contact page where you can give us feedback. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and YouTube, and you can follow Choose the Nickel on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We invite you to share Choose the Nickel with your friends and join us in our quest to teach kids financial freedom.